Well, hello and welcome to Watchbox. I'm Tim Masso and this is Watches Tonight. We've got Sid tonight on the switcher. Sean's out of town, and I'm glad to greet all of you with the evening's program, which includes lots of live chat and interaction, as well as my Watches and Wonders 2023 predictions. We're going to be Rolex Cellini and Patek Philippe heavy, but not exclusive. All of that, and I share your wrist shots tonight on Watches Tonight. Welcome to Matt Foster, Decimus 2, Joseph Z, Arto Charles, Butik 1 from Poland, Richard Combs from South Florida, Hale Bop, we got Watches with Dennis from Kansas, Dixon Lee, Time Hill from Virginia, we've got Kevin Hawthorne and Decibels from DC. Welcome, guys. Visit thewatchbox.com. Remember, new window, keep me streaming. It is my favorite hardware store, and I hope yours. Updated multiple times per day. If you checked it today, you are already out of date. Check it again. The refresh button is your friend. Also, join me on Instagram, my world, Tim_Masso, where you can see watches not posted to the Watchbox website, 1-minute format reviews, as well as a window into my lifestyle, including cars I like, events I've attended, and people I've met. All of that, Tim_Masso on Instagram. Welcome to Vince P. Curtis Arndt, who's going to be meeting with me out in California. He's down in San Diego now. It's going to be a good time. We're going to do a collector conversation. We got Mr. Z from Long Island, my old neck of the woods. We've got Andreas from Cyprus staying up late with us. Deech 2086 from Western Massachusetts. Mateo C. Darkstar, Sean Hansen. Seif K asking who needs a Daytona. I want a speedy 3539. Lloyd Kerr, Outlaw Pagoda. Rick on Watches, and Wolfgang from Austria. Thomas Burnett, welcome, guys. We've got a lot of our regulars, and we've got even more on the agenda because we're looking at viewer wrist shots number 1. I asked, you answered. Sam N gets us rolling with our evening wrist shots with his steel ceramic Rolex Daytona and Ferrari FF. That is a power pairing. We have Rob W, who's countering with his own English Aston Martin DB11 and Patek Philippe 5231 World Time, or 5230 World Time. That's not the enamel, but it is beautiful and perfectly paired. We've got Mufadal G, who takes a boutique delivery of his Vacheron Constantin overseas chronograph in Houston. Tarek H wears his H. Moser & C Endeavor Center Seconds Palladium Fume dial at the wheel of his BMW 3 Series. Max S, a man after my own heart, a white gold blue dial Pepsi Rolex GMT and a 2023 Corvette C8 hitting the road together. We have Jimmy Y courtside at the Suns Kings game with his Rolex Submariner Hulk. That is an impressive lead-off wrist shot set, guys. Send them to Monday mailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your wrist on my list. Who else is in the box? We've got IB, cheers from the Southwest, underachieving watch collector from Minneapolis, Mark S, a regular on the show from Brooklyn. We've got Sinkan H from London staying up late with us, Rick on watches, Caliber YQG, and John S. Good to be talking watches this Monday. We've got Nadev S from Israel, again, staying up late with us. Keystar G60, I see you, and Soma R as well. Welcome, guys. Okay, so Rolex Cellini 2023 predictions and wish list. We did the Rolex prediction show, but it was dominated by just 2 model lines. Why? Because we're going to get some sort of 60th anniversary Daytona and some sort of 70th anniversary sub. Now, we've seen a little bit of what might be the leaked final product as Rolex has unfortunately been a little bit unmasked for once. There's a little bit of a sieve in Geneva, which was previously airtight. We've seen a platinum blue dial sub that may or may not be a hoax, and we have seen a yellow gold meteorite dial Daytona, which again may or may not be a hoax. But if we're going to have anniversary models, and those are they, then understandably, the internet will be a buzz, which is why we did those 2 model lines separately, and today we're going to do Cellini, which is the most underrated and, if you are a dress watch fan, the most intriguing, because Rolex has more flexibility here to do new and unprecedented things, or at the very least, things it hasn't done in a long time. Whereas with the Sub and the Daytona, the codes are much more thoroughly established. So, The Cellini moon phase, to recap, is the only current Cellini model. 5 years ago, we had an entire model line with automatics. We had calendars, we had the moon phase, we had a dual time, and if you go back even further, we had truly ambitious models like the display caseback Prince Form watch. Today, Cellini almost seems to be on borrowed time, or certainly its last leg. It would be no shock at all if Rolex decided that we simply don't need a Cellini collection for a little while. But if they want to get ambitious and revive their dress watch, I have some thoughts, and I want to read your thoughts for Cellini because this is an interactive episode, and I'm going to be reading what you have to say about what Rolex should do with its dress watch. So, other Cellini models at this point have been discontinued, and the Prince, which was super cool, is long gone. That one ran from 2005 to 2014. Here is what I would love to see. First, I would love to see all the gold and platinum Rolex sports watches become Cellinis. I've shared this before, but I feel like if you want to make Cellini something special, tie it more closely to the core of the Rolex model line. These yellow gold, rose gold, white gold, and platinum sports watches are only 1 degree removed from what they could be as dress watches. Think about this, perhaps with black and brown alligator leather straps, deployant clasps, quick release systems so you could take them off the strap and put them on the bracelet as necessary, we would all of a sudden have a Cellini line massively in demand. And Rolex could say, look, at Rolex we make sports watches and we make elegant sports watches. We don't necessarily make Calatrava wannabes, and that's fine for us because we want all our model lines to be equally strong. We don't want to see aged inventory in cases. We don't want to see these watches selling for low prices pre-owned. We don't want to see 100 of them up on Chrono 24 below list price. And by tying Cellini to the sports watches, you could absolutely do that. Just make all of the precious metal sports watches Cellini. You could also do some things to tailor them better as dress watches. Nothing says we have to have the same case shape for a luxury Submariner that we have for standard Submariner. Think of the difference between something like a Submariner and a Yachtmaster case, and you see where I'm coming from here. The yellow gold, rose gold, white gold, platinum Submariner, GMT, or Daytona does not necessarily have to have the exact same case as the stainless steel or, more recently, titanium equivalent. So just keep that in mind. We could also see the return, there's the titanium, but if we could step back and take one last look at that Prince. The Prince had engraved flanks. If you look at the flank of that yellow gold model, they did interesting things with the profile to give it an awesome Art Deco look. And that's something that could also be unleashed on the Cellini versions of the sports watches, and I would love to see it. Now, here's the other thing. Pure dress watches don't necessarily have to be precious metal. If Rolex wants to stick with dress style watches, not make the gold sports watches dress watches, then why not offer these dress watches in a base metal? F.P. Journe demonstrated the potential with tantalum, and de Bethune makes its dress watches in titanium. So now that Rolex is using titanium in its model line with the new bonkers 126067 Deep Sea Challenge, why not use titanium in a most unexpected form, in a dress watch case? Now you're not paying for precious metal, you're paying for the horology, and if Rolex plays its cards right and keeps the collection exclusive, this will make it all the more desirable. They'll be able, if they want, to charge precious metal prices for the titanium. If they make fewer than the market demands, that could be a very hot Cellini model line. I don't even think Cellini needs precious metal, and that would really set it apart if it were an all base metal steel titanium dress watch collection, because I don't know of anyone who's currently doing only base metals for their dress watch collections. Now, loom. Here's something we should think about. Loom on Rolex dress watches. It has not been their convention in the past, but if there's one lesson we've learned from Rolex sports watches, it's that people wear them all the time. A Submariner is appropriate in any attire, in any situation. One of the reasons it's so flexible is because it is elegant, but it's also water resistant and well loomed. And if you could make a Cellini more versatile, you could come from the opposite end of the spectrum. Instead of a sports watch that we wear all the time because it's highly flexible and versatile, we could have a dress watch that we wear all the time for the very same reasons, which is why I think Cellini would be well advised to consider steel and titanium, but also well-loomed dials for its dress watches. And I should add, bracelets. One of the great strengths of Rolex sports watches is that the bracelets are more solid, robust, and imposing than anything else in the industry. To find a bracelet that is tangibly more expensive, you really have to go upscale to high horology, and you need to look at boutique brands that make far fewer watches. Rolex bracelets look and feel like $1 million, and while I don't necessarily want to see an Oyster bracelet on a Cellini, something like a factory Milanese mesh bracelet from Rolex would break the internet. I think that's really something they need to consider. Add some sort of sliding adjustment for fine sizing, and you would have the best dress watch bracelet in the world, because you know Rolex standards are impeccable. Jumping back into the box right here, we have Caliber YQG saying, the return of the Prince would be cool. We have Curtis Arndt saying, tantalum case material, but the case is the same. Create a studio to hand finish the movement with the rotor removed, display case back 100 meters, water resistant. Basically, he's saying what you want is a finer dress watch from Rolex with more tangible, handcrafted intervention, but also more durability to make it more like the sports watch. It's something you want to wear all the time. We've got Faisal joining in. Happy to catch me live. Faisal, thank you so much for following this show. I appreciate your support. Chris F. saying a Cellini Daytona would be so sweet. How Rolex barely treats it like a sports watch anymore anyways. Leo Dare saying Cellini should have display case backs and decorated movements. And if you want an idea of what that might look like, you're about to see it. We also have Thomas Burnett. The Cellini moon phase is rather nice. I would love to see the Prince make a comeback. A Cellini world timer would be a great addition to the range. We have Ricardo saying, I think they should turn the Cellini into a Coke bezel GMT stainless steel sports watch. There's an interesting idea right there. I didn't see that one coming. And we've got Chris F. down in South Florida coming to me from Miami. We've got Thomasina C. and we've got John Goodman from Yellowstone Country in America's West. Also, we have Thomasina saying Cellini should go back to the tank-like Prince, and I gotta agree with you on that front. We have Watches with Dennis saying, I wonder if Rolex could maybe play around with a different style for Cellini, a bit more sporty, but not akin to the current Pro lines. Maybe their take on a Breguet Marine 5517, for instance. Yeah, adopt a little bit of that formality and upscale refinement, but keep it sporty, you know, don't make it a super stuffy dress watch. It doesn't need to be a Calatrava, and it definitely doesn't need to be a Vacheron Patrimony. We have Horology Homies saying, I approve the Rolex Cellini RLX Titanium, or whatever that special metal is. And then we have Mark K asking, does that mean you can consider 42mm watches still a dress watch these days? Well, if it's a Portuguese, absolutely. Rolex, I'm not sure. And then we've got Thomas B staying up late with us in continental Europe, joining from Lucerne, Switzerland, the home of Bucherer. What else is going on here? We have IBGMT saying a 6062 remake would be incredible. I am with you on that 6062 Star Dial rebirth, and we're going to explore that possibility. Because here's the thing. We will talk about complications in Cellini. I would also say there need to be some perks. Like when you buy a car at a Porsche dealer, you get the best dealer experience in the world. The facilities are incredible. The Wi-Fi is lightning fast. They will order you lunch while you wait. The standard of service is peerless. Every guy you deal with knows his job and takes no more time than necessary to get it done. So let's look at Cellini as an upscale experience. Rolex to the next level, if you will. Why not have a longer warranty? 5 years is great, but with Rolex saying its watches have 10-year service intervals, why not make it a full 10? That's a big deal, not just for Hyundai and Kia, but also for watch brands. 10 years makes an impression. Also, how about expressly limited production? Now, Rolex has only done a couple of limited editions in its entire existence, but being clear that you're only going to make a handful of watches per year is a major incentive to buy something because it will always be special. And exclusive display case backs, just like on the old Prince. This was the 7040 in the yellow gold Prince version. You see, it has a spectacular Clou de Paris in gold gilt, absolutely mind-blowing that we had a watch like this under a display case back in 2005 from Rolex. More like this, please. Let's make the Cellinis feel very, very special, and an exclusive set of decorated movements with display case backs would get that done. Now, we had questions about what a hand-finished display case back Rolex would look like. Well, let's say Cellini becomes Rolex's haute horlogerie platform along the lines of Les Artisans de Genève. Sid, I don't know if you can go full screen with this, but this was a Artisan Daytona custom that I shot for an unlisted video a long time ago, and you could see what they did. Their own bezel, modified screw-down pushers to look like a vintage Daytona, like a 62, 63. They went with a full skeleton dial. They skeletonized the movement. They even skeletonized the mainspring barrel. Very, very special. And then they silk screened all of the logos under the sapphire. Make Cellini Rolex's platform for doing stuff like this, proving its expertise with all arts, not just engineering and mass production, but hand finishing, skeletonization, engraving, enameling, and gem setting. This was the case back of that Artisan de Genève piece. And you could see that not only did they do a manual wind conversion of the Rolex 4130, they media blasted and micro beveled all the bridges and plates. It was very impressive. This watch in the image, of course, is Artisan de Genève, but it's a rough guide to how Rolex might go upmarket with Cellini if it really wishes to do so. Or Rolex Cellini could focus on very basic dress watches with an extravagant artisanal decoration in the mold of Patek's Calatrava 5088-100P, which features a solid gold dial, hand engraved, and then fired with Grand Faux enamel. 2 hands is all you need to make a statement when you've got a watch like this, and that could very easily be a future direction for Rolex Cellini. Heck, the atelier that currently does Rolex gem setting could expand to do engraving and enameling. Rolex only needs to sell a few per year to build a towering reputation as a brand that can achieve absolutely anything, from the 50mm Mariana Trench sports watch to an ultra-fine horlogerie hand-finished 2-hand watch. Again, Rolex needs to sell only a few of these. Cellini may not be a mainstream brand. It may only be a few hundred pieces a year, economically insignificant, but hugely beneficial to the image of Rolex as a universe of competence. So they would be known for doing everything well, not just consistent quality in the mainstream luxury market. We talked about the 6062. Let's talk more about complications. Complications could return to the catalog with Cellini at a level not offered on the sports watches. That is the one of roughly 12 Rolex 4113, which was Rolex's split-second 44mm Rattrapant pre-war chronograph. An absolute monster. This is a 7-figure watch, but who's to say something like it couldn't be reborn today with both tachymeter and telemeter on a split-second twin-register dial? The possibilities are endless, and look at those double-finished lugs. This could make a comeback in a big way on Cellini. No mere chronographs or GMTs. Rolex has those complications now. Let's talk about Rattrapant. Let's talk about calendar chronographs. Here is a Jean-Claude Killy. I believe that's the 6036. Triple calendar and a chronograph in an Oyster case? Yes, please. And there's no reason that couldn't be a Cellini today. Something reviving this combination in a beautifully tapered set of lugs. You can see those lugs really do look more like what you'd find on a Yachtmaster, a Daytona, or a Day-Date than what you'll find on a Sub, a GMT, or a Sea Dweller. This is very special and a great guide to where Cellini could and maybe should go. Or do something that pegs the meter and breaks the frame for technology in a wristwatch. If any company in the world has the money and the ability to do something never seen before in a wristwatch, it is Rolex, even if they're often disinclined to do it. So, let's introduce a world's first fully self-contained, compact atomic clock for the wrist. We've seen some cartoonish clock-like things made for the wrist, but I'm talking about a watch that looks and wears like a wristwatch, that uses atomic timing technology, not a radio watch that receives a signal from an atomic clock, a fully self-contained timing unit. And this is an atomic clock for the wrist, and no, I don't mean that kind of atomic clock. No doomsday clocks for the wrist. Let's stick to the upbeat version of atomic horology. Something like a wearable version of 2019's Urwerk AMC, where you had a near 80-pound machined aluminum case containing an atomic clock that would actually dock with the watch, the AMC watch, regulate it, set it, and wind it. Rolex has patents out for fully self-contained wrist atomic clocks already. and they've been internationally filed, which means Rolex hasn't just filed in its home market of Switzerland and in Europe, it's filed in Asia and the United States, which means Rolex is at least thinking about doing this. And they're fairly far down the road with conceptual engineering. If any collection deserves it, it's Cellini. Become what the Oyster Quartz was back in 1977, or the 5100 Beta 21 in 1970. What were at the time the most precise watches Rolex knew how to make, breaking the boundaries set by mechanical watchmaking and really defining the state of the art. Rolex's Cellini atomic clock could be that. Okay, price points could rise to support enhanced features and volume expectations remaining low to ensure exclusivity. And that point is key. Cellini needs to be a watch that is difficult to obtain and always produced at a level below market demand, much like Rolex does quite well with its sports watches and Ferrari does with its V12s. Let's see what you guys are saying here. We have Andrew T saying hand finishing and skeletonization just isn't Rolex's style, unfortunately. We have Dark Star saying Cellini should be something like Tudor. It should be Rolex's heritage platform. If Rolex won't do heritage designs with the sports watches, why not have vintage reeditions under the banner of Cellini? And that's not a bad idea. We have Huxley, Orwell, and Rand saying Rolex is going to end up owning Patek anyway, so all this may be moot. I have an upcoming episode titled Why Rolex Should Buy Patek, but you're going to have to wait for it, not today. What else we have going on here? We have Chili Badger saying Patek is king, Rolex is prince. Is that a double entendre with Rolex being a prince? And then right here we have underachieving watch collector saying Rolex is too lazy to make impressive watches. Take another look. Rolex makes quietly impressive watches. Multiple internal revisions to their movements that they don't advertise are impressive. You just don't see them. What else is going on here? We have Jim Millett saying that Patek 5088-100P is stunning, and I agree. What else is going on in the box? Faisal saying, caught the Masso live stream evening from Hertfordshire. I appreciate that, staying up late with me. We've got Sorov saying, Rolex Cellini should come on a bracelet full gold. Joseph Z saying, Cellini could be Rolex's version of the Patek Advanced Research, pushing the limits with technology in wristwatches. Benjamin E. saying, I don't see Rolex doing anything crazy, although I like the speculation predictions. In the end, we'll see the yellow gold Hulk and some comeback of a color combination. Brendan Cunningham, who writes Horolonomics, a very cool horology-themed and Rolex-focused economics blog. He's saying right here, Rolex is not lazy, it's exceedingly deliberate, and this is a man who would know. Definitely check out his website and the book he wrote about Rolex advertising in the 60s. We've got Jorge M. saying, hello, finally made it from Valencia, Spain, and we've got Sorov, good evening from Toronto. Guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining in the live show. I'm also going to say that all things considered, if Rolex wants to push the limits with Cellini, then you could also consider ultra thin to be a limit. After all, there are a lot of very sophisticated watch brands that offer incredible complications and yet bulk when ultra-thin watchmaking is concerned. Look at Omega. If Omega has one genetic defect across all of its models and all of its model lines, it's the thickness of its watches. Yes, it does incredible things, including high horology that Rolex does not, but Omega watches are just way too thick, especially some of the Speedmaster and Seamaster complications. It feels like you're wearing a tuna can on the wrist, and it's not far removed from that reality. So I would say if Rolex wants to take Cellini to a level unheard of in mainstream horology, and by mainstream I mean Omega, Rolex, Breitling, a Grand Seiko, that sort of thing, then looking at the possibilities of the ultra thin, especially with display casebacks, is definitely worth their while. Okay, let's see what we've got. Viewers shots number 2. Okay guys, Dan V of Milwaukee. I didn't mean to badmouth Omega there. He sports his Omega Speedmaster Broad Arrow Rattrapant, which is fairly thick, which he bought from Alex at Watchbox, but it is one of the coolest high horology modern Omegas. He even got Jack Frost in there. We've got Udistira H of Melbourne, stops for refreshment with his Grand Seiko SBGJ 299 spring drive automatic. We've got And by the way, that might be the pure photography shot of the night. Well, car A, Gardens by the Numbers, with his IWC Pilot's Watch chronograph Spitfire out in the garden. We've got Derek W. of Michigan at the airport with his vintage Omega Speedmaster Professional. I think it's a 145022, looking good. Respect the classics. We've got Luis C. of the Philippines, who motors with the massive Panerai Luminor Submersible PAM 194. Let's see what's going on in the box. And by the way, guys, send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com. Okay, so we have underachieving watch collector saying his Rolex prediction is a few changes in bezel colors, and that's it. What else do we have? We have Sorov saying Rolex should do a Milgauss with diamond bolt hand and indices. That's where we want the gem setting. It looks, if you believe the leaks, it looks like we're getting a new Milgauss with the crown guard case from the Air King, more or less, and also a new movement. Not as exciting as what I would have hoped. I would have hoped for a return to honeycomb dials. I would have hoped for a return to things like rotating bezels, a CERN dial maybe. But if that's the only new Milgauss we get, well, at the very least, people who like the current Milgauss will likely enjoy the new Milgauss. What else is going on here? Watches with Dennis saying, purported Rolex leaks aside, I still wonder if Rolex will really do surprisingly little this year. I still remember being shocked at the Explorer 2 changes for the 50th and how slight visually it was. It really was very difficult to tell apart the old Explorer 242 from the quote-unquote new Explorer 242. And we were talking about doing cool things like a cream dial, going back to 40 or at least 41 millimeters, all these things that seemed really exciting, and then they didn't do any of it. But still, with big anniversaries coming up, 60 years of the Daytona, 70 years of the Sub, and 90 years of the Oyster Perpetual, I'll be shocked if Rolex doesn't do at least one watch that becomes as legendary as the 2003 Kermit or the 2013 Platona in platinum. What else is going on? We got a friend, the English Watch, joining in from the UK, and OT finally caught live greetings from Rome. That's a really cool thing. Rome, the seat of the papacy and the capital of world culture in the heart of Italy. We have Tim Schubart saying wood dials would be amazing. And Rolex does have a history of wood dials, mostly on date-8s, but it's out there. A wood dial Cellini would really be something. All right. Watches and Wonders, 2023 Patek Philippe predictions and wish lists. Let's take a look at what Patek Philippe might give us. Sports watch and complications on the agenda. That's my prediction. So, the Nautilus. Last year we witnessed the return of a core model for the Nautilus lineup in the 5811 1G, which was a replacement for the 5711, albeit in white gold on a limited basis and now in 41 millimeters. Well, this year we may see other Nautilus line revisions, including perhaps the moon phase, the 5712, the annual calendar, the 5726, and maybe the travel time chronograph, the 5990. It's also possible, if we don't see revisions to the basic Nautilus model line up and down, that we might see new versions of this 5811, most likely colored gold, yellow or rose, or possibly two-tone, or maybe even a strap-clad option for the white gold 5811, a 5811G rather than a 1G on a bracelet. What I doubt is that we'll see steel so soon after the initial model launch in white gold, but all bets are off for Only Watch, where titanium 5811 might, for all intents and purposes, surface for one lucky bidder. After all, when Patek does titanium, it's generally for charity auctions or Middle Eastern royalty. So what could we see from the 5811? Almost certainly not stainless steel. Remember, discontinued in 2021. The Nautilus Jumbo, the 5711, was discontinued specifically because Terry Stern didn't want one model in one model line to overshadow the entire Patek Philippe brand. Coming back only a year later with a successor to that watch means that he's skirting exactly what he fears. But if he keeps the white gold watch as the only version of the Jumbo, then he hasn't quite reopened the door to steel Nautilus mania. So I think this watch will remain very limited and precious metal for now. That said, anything can happen in 2024 and 2025. Now, the Aquanaut is sorely in need of a redesign, and here's why. The 5167, which is the basic model, launched in 2007, and the 5164, the travel time, launched in 2011. Both of these watches are now superannuated by the standards of Patek Philippe refresh cycles. So with the Nautilus collection currently limited to precious metal and or expensive complications, there is a need for a steel Aquanaut, a core steel Aquanaut, to carry Patek's sports watch collection for men. You've got the ladies 24 on the other side, but I see the Aquanaut line, at least in the short term, holding the iron for Patek steel sports watches. So the 5167 has already received a new movement, the 26330 SC, so we need real changes, not just a change of movement, to amount to a real new model. Maybe a change in case size, maybe new dial options, maybe metals we haven't seen before. Would the world melt down if Patek offered a regular production tantalum Aquanaut? Yeah, it probably would. And that's a very real possibility because Patek makes its own cases. If it wanted to do this, it absolutely could. And it could do so without expanding its vow to spend no more than 20% of its annual production on stainless steel. If you introduce a new metal that's a base metal nonetheless, but not steel, suddenly you have the option to make a few more watches without breaking that 20% barrier. Okay, complications. When you think of Patek Philippe, if you're a traditionalist, not an Instagram addict, you probably think of watches like the original 1518 Perpetual Calendar chronograph. Indeed, all the Perpetual Calendar chronographs, the great mechanical engineering tradition, since 1941, there has always been a Perpetual Calendar chronograph in the Patek Philippe model line, and through the middle to late decades of the 20th century, it was usually the flagship watch in the collection. But the current 5270 is getting long in the tooth. Patek has had a Perpetual Calendar chronograph around for a long time, since the beginning of World War II. But the 5270 launched in 2011, and its predecessor, you've got to remember, the 5970, ran for just 7 years. So the time for a new PPQP chrono has definitely arrived. So I would say expect something sportier and immediately available in white metals with dark dials. Look at what Patek did with the 5172G in 2019. Remember, the 2010 5170 started as a very dressy watch in yellow gold with a silver dial and indices and Roman numerals. It was not the watch that the hardcore collector wants, which is almost always loom, a dark dial, and white metals. But when this 5172 came out, the very first version you see right there was the one that collectors really wanted. I would like to see this practice of offering a white metal and a sporty dial right off the bat for the replacement for the 5270. And I would like to see the new watch sized smaller than the current 5270's 41 millimeters. I don't think we need to go back to 36 millimeters like a 3970, but something along the lines of the 5373P of last year would be a really nice choice. So that watch came out last year. It's a split lefty perpetual calendar, which is awesome by itself, but it's also 38.3 millimeters. It has a gradient dial with a lovely top to bottom graining, scalloped case flanks to add a bit of profile depth, and a great universal size that can be worn by a man or a woman and not dominate your wrist like the 5270 does. That is my wish, that we get basically a perpetual calendar righty version of that watch this year. Now, it's time for a replacement for the Patek Philippe Calatrava Automatic 5227. It's a nice watch, it is hugely attractive, and its stealthy hunter caseback is still hugely impressive as a feat of mechanical manufacturing. But just as the manual wind hobnail Calatrava series was rebooted with the 6119 for 2021, the 5227 is likely to see a replacement after a decade on the market. It came out in 2013. So I expect to see a new regular offering in the automatic Calatrava collection. And sticking with the Calatrava theme, we're overdue for a Calatrava 96 successor. The 5196 was discontinued, that's the platinum model there, and it, not the 6119, remember, was the direct descendant of 1932's 96. which is now considered the first of what Patek dubs the Calatravas. And that 96 of 1932 was the first watch designed by the Sterns. It was the first Calatrava unofficially, and depending on who you ask, it may have been the first Patek with a reference number, so replacing it in the catalog will be a priority for Patek Philippe designers, as just like the Nautilus Jumbo, it pretty much needs to be in the catalog on a permanent basis in some form. All right, viewer wrist shots number 3. John S. is a man after my own heart with his Habring Irvin and the steel independent fabrication road bike, 2 pieces of real steel. We've got Chi F, who brings the color with his Rolex GMT Master 2 Pepsi on a Jubilee bracelet. Daniel A hits the streets with his Ulysse Nardin Freak X in carbonium. We've got George Y, who forwards a classic wrist shot of his rose gold Rolex Date-8, looking good. And Matthew S and Margot the Basset Hound admire the Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter on a NATO strap, and it does look good. Guys, send your wrist shots to Monday Mailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your watch in this box. We have Watch UR saying everyone is praising the iconic Rolex models, but still expects them to reinvent the wheel every year. Look at the incremental changes to the iPhone in recent years. Evolution, not revolution. Well, yes and no. Keep in mind that with the iPhone, the camera and the processing power often increase by huge margins, and it's usually the size of the case that changes externally. We've got Evelyn W saying, "Hi Tim, I've received more compliments from the Cherry Dial White Gold Date-8 on the Oyster you recently reviewed than anything else I've owned. Loving this ultimate stealth all-arounder." Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We have Jesse R. Hello from Ferndale, Michigan. We'll be watching later with my roommate. And then we have Jim Millett complimenting our man just now in the wrist shots. SMP on a NATO looks great. Brendan Cunningham saying, "I'd love a slightly larger Calatrava black dial with Breguet numerals." That's a good call, just like we saw with that 5196P, but with a black dial. We've got Ashay saying, "General stock sell-off, people start liquidating assets." Well, we're not quite there yet. And anyway, that's often a buying opportunity. If you've budgeted properly and planned financially, when other people are selling under distress, that's the best time to get a good deal on a watch. Cars too. What else is going on in the box? We've got Tim S. Would love to see Patek dress watches get more water resistance. I agree with you. It's time. When Tag Heuer can do a push-down crown with the Octavia and 100-meter water resistance, so can the dress watch majors like Patek, Audemars, and Vacheron. And then we have Mark S. Tim, how come every time a Blancpain 50 Fathoms is released, the banks explode? It does seem that way, right? Well, hopefully, it's also, why is it that at the point that we see the most supercars on the market, like when we're always at peak supercar, think the late 80s, the early 90s, 2001, 2008, it seems like that's when the world economy goes into the toilet. So if you see supercars in profusion on the covers of car magazines, then definitely the ball is about to break and the party is about to end. What else is going? We have Jim Millett saying, "Seen rumors about Pepsi going, cannot see it happening." And Ricardo, well said, Tim, I appreciate that. And what else is going on here? We've got Tobister M saying, "White gold Hulk would be something. That leaked yellow gold Hulk is eee." I got to agree with you a bit. Chili Badger loving the Nixie tombs in the background. That's by Dalibor Farney. So check out Dalibor Farney from the Czech Republic. You can check out the Czech. He does a good job with those things. And he even blows the glass by hand, which is very cool. All right, Wolfgang saying, "I'm with Jim. I don't see the Pepsi going away this year." And Arturo Soto, "What is new for Rolex?" I'm not sure. If you believe the leaks, not a whole lot, but I'm holding out for a revolution in the Cellinis or some sort of spectacular anniversary watch for the OP, the Daytona, or the Sub that we're not anticipating. What I'm really hoping we don't get is a pure precious metal or two-tone version of the Deep Sea Challenge. Although, if you remember the Deep Sea Special, we did get a full bracelet two-tone version of that. All right, viewer wrist shots number 4. Let's take a look. Owen H. pilots his Alfa Romeo Giulia with an automotive-themed Chopard Mille Miglia chronograph with engine-turned dial. Very cool. Abdul sports a rare Felipe Pikulik Sternenhimmel, number 5 at his home in Cairo. Definitely check out Pikulik. He's a up-and-coming German watchmaker. Jeremy L. of Alabama pilots his BMW with the Chris Ward C70 Antonio Ascari edition. We love our watches and wheels. Matt C. shares a dynamic action photo of his Panerai Luminor Marina on vacation in Fiji. And Dan R. takes us home with Glasuta Original's Pano Reserve at a performance of Mozart's Requiem. Send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com. And don't forget, guys, remember to send your love on Instagram. Join me, Tim_Masso. 1-minute reviews and an insight into the world of Watchbox and what I do in my spare time. What else is going on here? We have Edward Letton saying discontinued Pepsi would lead to anarchy. Probably. Anarchy on Chrono 24, that is, as people scramble to pick up the older ones. Mark S. Tim, did you get your new Holland cycle yet with Dura-Ace? Holland is not the problem. Dura-Ace is the problem. It's hard to get anything from Shimano these days. Supply lines in those regards have not unclogged. What else is going on? We have Jim Millett saying now a Le Mans Daytona, that would be cool. Remember, the Daytona in 1963 was originally called the Le Mans. How much would you love a limited edition titanium Rolex Le Mans chronograph for 2023? I asked, we'll see if they answer. Guys, thank you so much. Remember, check out Tim Masso on Instagram and thewatchbox.com. A great job tonight by Sid. He filled in for Sean. He had big shoes to fill and he did an awesome job at it. Time out, Tim out. Thanks for joining me and thanks for logging on.